The sky over Europe looked calm that morning. Too calm. Staff Sergeant Danny Mercer, waist gunner aboard a U.S. B-17 Flying Fortress, leaned against the cold metal frame of the bomber and looked out at the endless blanket of clouds below. At 25,000 feet, the world felt distant, quiet, unreal. But everyone on board knew better. 30 minutes to target, the pilot's voice crackled through the intercom. Danny adjusted his oxygen mask and checked his .50 caliber machine gun for the third time. The metal was freezing even through his gloves. Around him, the rest of the crew moved with practiced rhythm. Navigator bent over glowing instruments, bombardier double-checking release switches. Tail gunner scanning the sky like a hawk. They had flown together for months. They joked, argued, shared chocolate rations, and made promises about what they'd do after the war. Nobody said it out loud. But they all knew every mission could be the last. "Fighters at 2 o'clock!" The first warning came sharp and sudden. "Bandits, high right!" Danny's stomach dropped. He swung his gun toward the glare of the sun, and saw them. Small, fast, deadly. German fighters sliced through the sky like knives, their wings flashing as they dove toward the bomber formation. Black puffs of flak began bursting around them, rocking the B-17 with dull, violent thuds. The peaceful sky vanished in seconds. "Hold formation!" the pilot yelled. Tracer fire streaked past the windows. The air was suddenly alive with motion. Bombers, fighters, smoke trails, explosions in the distance. Danny gripped the handles of his gun. "Come on! Come on!" A fighter roared past, so close he saw the pilot's goggles. Danny fired. The .50 caliber thundered, the vibration shaking his arms. Brass casings clattered across the floor as smoke filled the compartment. He didn't think, didn't breathe, just aimed, and fired. Then everything changed. A flash. A deafening boom. The entire bomber lurched sideways with a force that felt like a giant hand had punched it out of the sky. "We're hit! We're hit! Bad!" Warning lights exploded across the control panel. One engine burst into flames. Shrapnel tore through the fuselage. The inside of the aircraft filled with smoke and freezing wind. Danny slammed into the side of the gun mount as the floor tilted beneath him. "Midsection's gone!" someone shouted over the intercom. "We're breaking apart!" Danny looked back, and his heart stopped. The rear half of the bomber was barely holding together. Metal skin peeled away in the wind. Wires snapped and whipped through the air. The aircraft wasn't flying anymore. It was falling. But the German fighters were still coming. And Danny Mercer, hanging in a broken bomber at 25,000 feet, kept firing. The B-17 wasn't flying anymore. It was falling through the sky like a wounded giant. Wind screamed through the torn fuselage. Loose cables whipped through the air like metal snakes. The floor beneath Danny's boots tilted at a sickening angle as the bomber dropped thousands of feet in seconds. "We're going down!" someone shouted. Then the intercom went dead in a burst of static. Smoke filled the air. The freezing wind burned his face. Oxygen mask half torn loose, Danny could barely breathe. But through the chaos, he saw them. 2 enemy fighters circling back. They weren't done. A gunner in a dying aircraft. The rear half of the bomber was barely attached now. Every second felt like the plane might rip apart completely. Danny wrapped one arm through the gun mount frame to keep from being thrown out into open sky. Below him, nothing but clouds and empty air 20,000 feet down. His hands were numb. His ears rang. His heart pounded so hard he could feel it in his throat. Then the first fighter lined up. Danny pulled the trigger. The .50 caliber roared again, louder than the wind, louder than fear. Shell casings tore away into the sky behind him. The entire broken aircraft shook with every burst he fired. The German pilot must have thought the bomber was already finished. He didn't expect return fire. Tracers ripped past the fighter's wing. The enemy aircraft veered hard, smoke trailing as it dove away. But the second one kept coming, falling, and fighting altitude kept dropping. 18,000 feet, 16,000. The bomber spun slightly, metal groaning like it was alive and in pain. Danny could see the clouds getting closer. He should have been trying to escape, should have been looking for a parachute, but the second fighter was still lining up for the kill, so he stayed on the gun. One last burst. One last defiant stand in a machine that was already doomed. He aimed carefully, not wild, not panicked, and fired. The fighter flashed past, then rolled sharply away, disappearing into the clouds below. For the first time since the explosion, there were no enemies in sight, just a shattered bomber, and the long fall to Earth. The silence hit first. After the screaming wind, after the gunfire, after the enemy fighters vanished into the clouds, there was only the sound of the dying bomber tearing itself apart. Danny looked around. Half the fuselage was gone. The sky was where the floor should be. The world below was rushing closer with terrifying speed. Altitude? Maybe 10,000 feet, maybe less. He finally let go of the gun. For the first time since the explosion, his hands were shaking. "Time to go," he muttered to himself. He unclipped from the mount, crawling along twisted metal and broken ribs of the aircraft. The bomber lurched again, dropping a wing, spinning slightly. A loose panel ripped away into the sky. Danny found his parachute pack wedged behind a bent frame beam. One strap was twisted. His gloves were stiff with cold, fingers numb. He forced them to work. Outside, the clouds were no longer distant. They were right there. The Earth was coming. Fast. The jump. The bomber shuddered violently. A final warning. Danny didn't wait for another. He pulled himself to the open gap where the side of the aircraft used to be. Wind slammed into him like a wall. For a split second, he looked back at the broken flying fortress that had carried him through so many missions. Then he jumped. The sky swallowed him whole. Free fall. No sound but wind. No up or down. Just spinning blue sky and white cloud. His bomber fell away behind him, shrinking fast. Danny counted in his head just like training. 1,000, 2,000, 3. He pulled. Nothing. His heart stopped. He yanked again. The parachute exploded open above him with a violent snap that jerked him upright so hard it stole his breath. Silence returned. Real silence. Below him, the countryside spread out like a map. Far away in the distance, a dark shape spiraled down. The remains of the B-17. He watched it disappear into the clouds. Then he looked at his hands. They were still shaking, but he was alive, and somewhere far above, in a battle already fading into history. A falling gunner had kept firing to the very end.